Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, we're going to talk about how to resolve chronic loneliness. Now, the video previously made before this, we actually discussed the risk factors of chronic loneliness, the risks of what can it do to you, not the risk factors, excuse me. Basically, what happens to individuals who are chronically lonely, what happens to their brain, their perception, their psychology of social experiences, their stress levels, and what illnesses, to some extent, can be increased based on the fact that they are lonely. We defined loneliness, and we also discussed some of the attributes that individuals can see for themselves to see if they fit chronic loneliness, the attributes, okay? So today what we're going to talk about is we're going to define loneliness again quickly, not as much as I did before. We're going to talk about the risks of people, the risk factors of those who are more higher chance to develop chronic loneliness, and what you can do about it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The first one is, let's define loneliness. Loneliness is not the lack of social contacts. That's not what it is. Loneliness is a subjective perspective of an individual basically feeling emotionally safe, seen, or reciprocated. And so it is the difference between how an individual desires their social experiences versus what they perceive they're actually experiencing. And so normally the goal is not necessarily just be social, although that can help. It's more about restoring the feeling of connection and reducing the negative thoughts in conjunction with getting more familiar with social spaces, okay? And so who are those individuals who are at risk for actually developing chronic loneliness? The first one, based on research, the research will be in the description box, is individuals with lower socioeconomic status. It depends on the country how this fits, but all countries, I believe, define individuals in this format. It's just the numbers are a little bit different. So economic stress is what was cited in the research as one of the contributing factors, which is correlated to low socioeconomic status, okay? Limited access to social opportunities, housing instability, and, which I thought was one of the most important ones, usually they're working multiple jobs or irregular hours. And therefore, it's harder to, if you're doing the night shift, or I believe it's called the graveyard shift, or let's say you work in retail and you work the afternoon shift, most individuals are socializing during that time and you're working. And then let's say in the morning, you're not working. Most individuals are working. And so the hours are a little bit flipped, which can be really difficult to interact socially. It does affect how you perceive yourself and how you interact with other people. The next one is marginalized and minority groups. I believe this is different dependent on where you live. And so I'm not going to touch too much on that because every country is different. I'm from the United States, so we have a pretty good idea of what we consider this. However, each country is different. The next one is neurodivergent individuals, those who have been diagnosed or who are autistic or ADHD. The next one is people with chronic illness or disability. It has a lot of factors to it, but a lot of times, some of the time, it's simply because some of them have a lot of difficulty leaving their house. That's part of it. The other issue is that they might be in a more financial restraint, and so they're unable to do certain things that may cost money to socialize. That also can contribute with the first one that we were talking about. And the next one is actually individuals with mental health conditions. And so those are some of the risk factors of individuals who can fall into the category of eventually developing chronic loneliness. However, as we had discussed in my previous video, the brain is what we call plastic. In some cases, all that really means is the state that we're seeing some of these symptoms and the behaviors that's coming out of these things, even the cognitive functioning, is reversible. And so we're going to talk about ways to reverse some of these things. As we had mentioned, the research is in the description box. The first one is actually more about getting familiar with social interactions. I think this is very important, and that's why I put it first, because I don't think any of the other things will work necessarily as well if this one is not prior to those steps. Chronic loneliness does put our brain in a threat mode, which I talked about in the previous video. All that means is we may overinterpret rejection. Socialization actually can become exhausting rather than rewarding, and you may withdraw even though you want connection. And so this is tricky because bombarding this individual with social interaction actually can become overwhelming because they're seeing it from this lens. And so what to do is you want to find what I would consider like a low stakes interaction. It will be predictable. And so going to the same gym class, same online community, same barista, it can be the same cafe you go to, just in general. And this is, a lot of people do this. I actually really like doing this. There's a diner near my house that I really love to go on every other Saturday. I go there every other Saturday morning. Just sometimes I don't even really eat anything. I just like to go there for a little bit because there's a part in the front where you can just sit and like, it's kind of like set up like a bar, but it's not. Like there's, which a lot of diners have, right? I don't remember what that part is called. And I sometimes like sitting there, and I do that very often. I've been doing it for years. And for me, that's just, for me, it's like a structure thing. But that's a good example of like a predictable interaction that you do all the time. Repetition actually can help build comfort. And a lot of individuals, humans in general, we like predictability. And so that's why this one's a really good one. The next one is focus on one safe connection before you add too many. The example I gave, the diner, that's a good example. You can find a coworker that you enjoy talking to, that you have lunch weekly with. You can have an online support group that you share interests with. You can go to one class or support group that you tend to connect with. That's a good one. The next one is to use structure to bypass motivation. In psychology, we see that structure and continuous repetition actually can bypass motivation, which means it sticks better, okay? Schedule interactions and connections like appointments. Do things that are built in to your schedule. Volunteering is a good one. Returning to groups, reoccurring groups, okay? That's a really good one. That means structure can carry you even if your energy is not actually processing the benefits of these things right away. The next one is reducing self-blame. Chronic loneliness, as we discussed in the previous video, does come with negative thoughts. Like, I'm likable, people don't like me. If I mattered, people would reach out, which is not true, not to the whole extent. And so instead, what I recommend, but of course this is just a video, I'm not telling you what to do, I'm just sharing information. Sometimes saying something positive against that can be overwhelming. However, labeling it for what it is, I feel can be helpful because it's logical. Understanding that self-criticism is just a symptom. This is a symptom of loneliness, not a reality. And being more aware of this can be very helpful. It causes it to be less distressing, but also you don't take it as seriously, right? So, for example, if somebody has a continuous fever, a low-grade fever, that can be really frightening. But let's just say you had surgery and you had like a low-grade fever right after. Sometimes that is a symptom. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to talk too much on it, but sometimes that happens, and it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. I think it has to do with your blood. If anyone's a doctor or a nurse, I forgot the word. It starts with an A, I think. It occurs sometimes after surgery, and it goes away by itself. If now that you know it's just a symptom, it doesn't mean that you have a chronic infection or whatever it is. Now that you know, it's less likely to affect and impair other areas of your life. That's very similar to this, okay? The next one is build non-social sources of regulation, regular movement. I take a walk, or I walk every day, even if it's cold outside. I know it sounds strange. I sometimes walk in my basement, or I just do steps around my house or when I'm watching TV. And I put my significant other on this too. Now he does this as well, because to me, I like I like it, right? I do that. That's something I do every day, regardless of what's happening. I always have my steps in. It's what I like to do. Now he does it too, and he really likes it. That's just an example, but anything. You guys can do something creative, draw, journal, something of that sort. And that creates it lowers your baseline stress, and that makes social contact and social connection less threatening. So this is just a baseline. If it's long-term, of course, I recommend reaching out to a professional. I would say that I'm a therapist, and I feel like this is very helpful for individuals to have a regular session with their therapist once a week, twice a week, depending on whatever your circumstances, it does help. It really helps with patients to feel like they're building skills, but they also have someone they can trust that can help them to establish what is specific to them. Like I have some patients that they have a lot of these typical issues, not typical, but more common issues, but they also have specific things that are just their issues. And that can't be found out by a video. A therapist is going to help you with your specific case. So that's just why I mentioned that. The research is in the description box. I hope this video is helpful. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.